Why it happened. The road to December 7th, 1941. December 7th, 1941 is more than a date in American history. It is a turning point. On that morning, the United States was attacked without warning, without a declaration of war, and without precedent on its own soil. The surprise assault on Pearl Harbor shocked the nation, killed thousands, and shattered the belief that America could remain untouched by global conflict. This documentary explains why the Pearl Harbor attack happened, how tensions escalated to that point, and why war between Japan and the United States became unavoidable. To understand the attack, we must first understand the world that produced it. The global background, a world moving toward war. In the aftermath of World War I, the global balance of power was unstable. Europe was weakened. Empires had collapsed. New powers were rising. By the 1930s, three aggressive expansionist regimes were reshaping the world. Nazi Germany in Europe, Fascist Italy in the Mediterranean, Imperial Japan in Asia and the Pacific. Japan, in particular, faced a unique problem. It was an industrial nation with very limited natural resources. Japan lacked oil, iron, coal, rubber. To survive as a modern military power, it depended heavily on imports, especially from the United States. At the same time, Japan's military leadership believed expansion was essential for survival and national honor. Japan's expansion in Asia. In 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria, a region rich in coal and iron. In 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China, beginning the Second Sino-Japanese War. The conflict was brutal. Civilian massacres, bombings, and atrocities shocked the world and alarmed American leaders. The United States had significant economic interests in China and strong public sympathy for the Chinese population. Still, America did not intervene militarily. Instead, it protested diplomatically. But Japan continued expanding. By 1940, Japan had allied itself with Germany and Italy, forming the Tripartite Pact, signaling clearly where it stood in the global conflict. America's position, isolation, and limits. Throughout the 1930s, the United States remained largely isolationist. The memory of World War I was still painful. More than 116,000 Americans had died. Many believed involvement in another European or Asian war would be a mistake. Congress passed neutrality acts, limiting arms sales and involvement in foreign conflicts. However, President Franklin D. Roosevelt understood something many Americans did not yet fully accept. Global conflict could not be avoided forever. While publicly neutral, Roosevelt slowly prepared the nation. Economic pressure, the oil embargo. As Japan expanded further into Southeast Asia, the United States escalated its response. In 1940, America restricted exports of aviation fuel and scrap metal to Japan. In July 1941, after Japan occupied French Indochina, the United States froze Japanese assets and imposed a total oil embargo. This decision was decisive. At the time, over 80% of Japan's oil came from the United States. Without oil, the Japanese Navy would stop, the Air Force would be grounded, industry would collapse. Japanese leaders estimated they had less than 2 years of oil reserves. Japan now faced a stark choice: withdraw from conquered territories, or seize oil-rich regions by force. Withdrawal was seen as national humiliation. The military chose war. Diplomacy fails. Negotiations collapse. Throughout 1941, Japanese diplomats negotiated with the United States. Japan demanded recognition of its dominance in Asia. The U.S. demanded withdrawal from China and Indochina. Neither side was willing to concede. Behind the scenes, while negotiations continued, Japan's military prepared for war. Pearl Harbor was already being studied. Why Pearl Harbor? Japan knew it could not defeat the United States in a long industrial war. American shipyards, factories, and population dwarfed Japan's capacity. So Japanese planners adopted a strategy based on shock. Their belief, if the U.S. Pacific Fleet could be destroyed in a single surprise blow, America would lose the will to fight and accept a negotiated settlement. Pearl Harbor, home to the Pacific Fleet, became the target. It was a centralized naval base, far from the continental United States, considered vulnerable to surprise. The plan was risky, but Japan believed it was their best chance. The illusion of American weakness. A fatal miscalculation shaped Japanese strategy. Japanese leadership believed Americans were unwilling to suffer heavy losses. The U.S. lacked resolve for prolonged war. One decisive blow would break American morale. They underestimated American industrial power, American unity after attack, the psychological effect of surprise aggression. This misjudgment would prove catastrophic. The final decision. By late November 1941, Japan's fleet was ordered to prepare. On November 26, the strike force left Japan under strict radio silence. At the same time, Japanese diplomats in Washington continued negotiations, a deliberate deception to preserve surprise. War was now inevitable. Pearl Harbor was next. The night before, silence before the storm. On the night of December 6, 1941, Pearl Harbor was quiet. Sailors wrote letters home. Officers planned routines for the coming week. No one expected war the next morning. Across the Pacific, however, a Japanese strike force was already in position. 6 aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, floated silently north of Hawaii. Their decks were loaded with aircraft, fuel, bombs, and torpedoes. Radio silence was absolute. At 6 a.m., Japanese pilots prepared for launch. Early warnings, missed signals. At 7:02 a.m., American radar operators at Opana Point detected a large formation of aircraft approaching Oahu. It was the largest radar contact they had ever seen. The report was passed to a duty officer. The response. Those were assumed to be American B-17 bombers expected from the mainland. The warning was dismissed. The system worked, but the interpretation failed. The first wave, 7:48 a.m. At 7:48 a.m., Japanese aircraft descended on Pearl Harbor. The attack began without warning. Japanese pilots transmitted a simple message back to their carriers. Tora, Tora, Tora. It meant total surprise had been achieved. Within seconds, torpedoes struck battleships at anchor. Bombs rained down on airfields. Machine guns strafed planes on the ground. American aircraft had been parked wing to wing to prevent sabotage, making them perfect targets. Explosions echoed across the harbor. Smoke filled the sky. The battleships, primary targets. The Japanese focused on the heart of the Pacific Fleet. Battleships lined up along Battleship Row. One by one, they were hit. USS Oklahoma was struck by multiple torpedoes and capsized. USS West Virginia sank at its moorings. USS California flooded and settled into the harbor. USS Nevada attempted to escape, but was heavily damaged. Then came the USS Arizona. A high-altitude bomb penetrated the deck and detonated the forward ammunition magazine. The explosion was massive. The ship was torn apart. In seconds, 1,177 sailors and Marines were killed. Many never had a chance to escape. Chaos and confusion. Pearl Harbor became a battlefield. Ships burned. Oil ignited on the water. Men swam through fire to reach shore. Officers tried to organize defenses amid destruction. Some ships returned fire within minutes. Others fought blindly through smoke. Anti-aircraft guns roared. Rifles were fired at attacking planes. Despite the surprise, resistance grew rapidly. The second wave, escalation. At approximately 8:54 a.m., a second wave of Japanese aircraft arrived. Their mission, destroy remaining ships, cripple repair facilities, finish what the first wave began. They attacked airfields, hangars, ships already damaged. American defenses were now active. Japanese losses increased. By 10 a.m., the attack was over. In less than 2 hours, Pearl Harbor had been devastated. Acts of American heroism. Amid the destruction, countless acts of courage occurred. Pilots took off in damaged aircraft under fire. Medics treated wounded men while bombs fell. Sailors re-entered burning ships to rescue trapped crew. Many died saving others. Pearl Harbor revealed not panic, but determination, what Japan failed to destroy. Despite tactical success, Japan missed critical targets. They did not destroy U.S. aircraft carriers, not in port, fuel storage tanks, dry docks, and repair facilities. These omissions would prove decisive. The Pacific Fleet could be repaired. The war was far from over. Immediate aftermath. The harbor was silent again. Smoke drifted upward. Wreckage floated everywhere. Over 2,400 Americans were dead. More than 1,000 were wounded. Japan lost 29 aircraft and 5 midget submarines. The attack had succeeded tactically, but failed strategically. A nation learns the truth. News reached Washington within hours. The shock was immediate. Across America, radios interrupted programming. Newspapers rushed to print. The United States was under attack. Public opinion shifted instantly. Isolation ended. The immediate response, a nation in shock. On the afternoon of December 7, 1941, the United States was still trying to comprehend what had happened. Military commanders assessed damage. Hospitals overflowed with wounded sailors. Families waited desperately for news. Across the country, radios carried the same message. America had been attacked. There was no confusion about responsibility, no debate about intent. Japan had struck first. By nightfall, one thing was clear. The United States could no longer remain neutral. December 8, 1941, the infamy speech. At 12:30 p.m. on December 8, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed a joint session of Congress. The speech lasted just over 7 minutes. Its impact lasted generations. Roosevelt spoke calmly, deliberately, and with controlled anger. He made 3 things unmistakably clear. The attack was deliberate. It was premeditated. It was carried out while Japan pretended to negotiate peace. Then he delivered the line that would define the moment. December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. Within 1 hour, Congress declared war on Japan. Only one vote opposed it. The United States was now at war. A global war begins for America. 3 days later, on December 11, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. America responded immediately. What began at Pearl Harbor now expanded into a global conflict. The United States would fight in the Pacific against Japan, in Europe against Nazi Germany, in North Africa, the Atlantic, and the skies above. Pearl Harbor had transformed a regional war into a world war involving American power. National unity, isolationism ends. Before Pearl Harbor, the American public was deeply divided. After Pearl Harbor, division vanished. Enlistment offices overflowed. Factories retooled overnight. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. The slogan, "Remember Pearl Harbor," appeared everywhere, on posters, on banners, on aircraft and ships. The attack unified the nation with a single purpose: victory, the arsenal of democracy. The true American response was not just military. It was industrial. U.S. factories produced. Ships faster than Japan could sink them. Aircraft by the tens of thousands. Tanks, trucks, weapons, and ammunition at unmatched scale. American shipyards launched a new aircraft carrier roughly every few months. Japan could not compete with this output. The industrial imbalance sealed the long-term outcome of the war. Pearl Harbor awakened the full weight of American production. Strategic consequences, Japan's fatal error. Japan believed Pearl Harbor would cripple the United States. Instead, it guaranteed total war. Several strategic miscalculations proved fatal. Failure to destroy aircraft carriers. Failure to eliminate fuel reserves. Underestimating American resolve. Provoking a nation capable of overwhelming production. Japan won a battle. America won the war. Within 6 months, the U.S. Navy struck back at Midway, turning the tide in the Pacific. Pearl Harbor became Japan's greatest strategic mistake. The cost, human and moral. The victory came at enormous cost. Over 400,000 Americans would die in World War II. Millions more were wounded or permanently changed. Pearl Harbor also triggered darker chapters: fear, suspicion, the internment of Japanese Americans. These consequences remain part of the historical reckoning. Pearl Harbor did not just change military policy, it reshaped American society. Why Pearl Harbor still matters? Pearl Harbor matters because it explains something fundamental about history. Peace can vanish overnight. Security cannot be assumed. Preparedness matters. For the United States, Pearl Harbor marked a moment it accepted permanent global responsibility. After 1941, America would never return to isolation. It would lead. The memory of Pearl Harbor. Today, the wreck of the USS Arizona still rests beneath the waters of Pearl Harbor. Above it stands a memorial. Names are etched in stone. It is not just a grave. It is a warning and a reminder. Pearl Harbor is remembered not for defeat, but for what followed: unity, resolve, purpose. This documentary explained why the attack happened, how it was carried out, what the attackers failed to achieve, how America responded, why the world changed afterward. Pearl Harbor was meant to weaken the United States. Instead, it transformed it into a global superpower. Pearl Harbor did not break America. It awakened it, and the world has never been the same.